Hey everyone, how's it going? I want to make a video today about programming drums. I use program drums for the vast majority of stuff that I do, and the reason is it's just impractical for the most part to have a drummer come in and play all these parts. The time that I actually have to work on stuff is usually after hours when I'm not working my full-time job or I'm not with my family, so pretty much nights and stuff like that. And it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to get a drummer in here, track drums. Not only that, but I really don't want a $5,000 ticket for noise violation after 10 p.m. So anyways, I hope this tutorial helps you, maybe to answer some questions for you. If you're new to programming drums, this might be some good information for you. And if this is something you already do, maybe there's a couple things that I do that might help you out. As always, if you like my videos, please hit the like button and consider subscribing. All right, let's get to it. Alright, so I have a project open up in Reaper here, and it's actually offline, there it goes. And typically what I will do is when I start a new project, I will insert my drum instrument, and I will program a really basic drum beat to play to, just something that gets like the feel of the part that I'm trying to record, and record guitars to the drum beat that I program, because I feel like I get a better take when I do it that way. I'm not very good at playing to just a metronome, and when I do, I'm usually concentrating so much on just staying on time with the metronome that I lose a lot of feel in the guitar playing. So I just feel like my guitar takes are a lot better and they just sound a lot more natural when I have an actual drum sound to play to. So this whole thing is going to be in Reaper. I'm sure it works pretty similar in all DAWs, but you know, I use Reaper, so that's what I'm going to be showing it in. First thing you want to do here is insert. You can either go up here to insert, and then you can choose virtual instrument on new track, or you could just insert a new track, you know, double click down here, whatever, and then hit the inserts button here, and add effects, and then you'll be able to, your VSTI. VSTI is a VST instrument, and so you just pick your drums that you're working with. I've been using Perfect Drums lately. It's a really cool program. I really like it. I'm actually going to do a review on it here shortly, so watch out for that. And then I have another insert here, but I'll get into that in a minute. So once you have your drums inserted, go ahead and click the control button in Reaper, and it'll bring up this little pencil tool here, if you can see that. And you use that to draw in your region. And then once your region's drawn in, you just double click the region, and we'll open up your Midi Editor. The drums that you inserted will be tied to these keys right here on the left, and pretty much every one I've ever used, C2 is the bass drum. So that's where we'll start. And then typically the key above it is the snare drum. Okay. You press W to go to the start of your region. What this is, these are 16th note triplets, so there's all the 16th note triplets right there, and that's what the grid's set to. If you set it to 8th, then it's only going to show you 8th note triplets. So you can set this to whatever. I usually keep it on 16th notes just because that's the fastest that you can really go unless you're at like a much lower tempo. But anyways, whatever. Moving on. So these are just some grid options here. You can set it to triplet or straight. The drum pattern that I have in my head right now is a triplet pattern, so we're just going to leave it on that. And what I'm hearing in my head, normally when I do this, I enter these things in manually. So you just double click to add in notes. And yeah, so I'm just going to go ahead and start programming here. Okay, so I got one measure here. So that's the drum beat I'm going for. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and you right click to make that box and select multiple objects. So I'm going to go ahead and select all these, Control C, and then move to the next beat, press Control V and paste them. And put this marker back on the next beat, Control V, and so on and so forth. Okay, until I get to the end. So now I have this going on in that whole part. Doesn't really sound like a drum beat yet. So next thing we need to do is the cymbals. And this is probably the most important thing when you're programming drums, is just to think in terms of what a drummer can actually do in nature, okay? So typically a drummer is not going to be hitting 3 different drums at the same time. It's very, very unusual sounding. and you'll pick up on it right away when drums are programmed that way. So it's really important just to keep in mind what a drummer is actually capable of when you're programming drums if you want realistic drum programming. So right now I'm just doing the cymbals. So I'm gonna find a crash to come in on. That works. And then I think I'm gonna use bells right here. Bells on the quarter notes, actually. So sounds pretty good. And then I'll alternate this crash. So let me find another one here. Okay, I like how that's going so far. And then you can actually grab these and just do the same thing. Control C. And like so. And so if I was recording guitars right now, that's all I would need to record guitars. And it only took me a couple minutes, you know. Now, it's not going to be the final product, obviously, but it would be enough to get like a good guitar track too. So let's listen to it. Okay. So now we need to go in and start putting in the details here. So let's... We'll add in something right here. I'm just going to add in a really simple, quick little 16th note fill. And as you can hear, that sounds ridiculous. So it sounds ridiculous because all those hits are at full velocity right now. So what I'm going to do here is drop this one down. And in my experience, drummers typically hit the second hit in their fill sequence is always significantly lighter than the first one. I don't know why, it's just my experience recording drummers. So we'll go ahead and drop that one down. And the third hit, we'll drop that one down a little bit. And then I'm going to grab all these, and I'm just going to drop them all down together. Okay, let's listen to that. A little bit better. That middle one's a little quiet. And I think the whole thing needs to come down. The middle one's a little bit quiet. Much better. Okay, so as you can see, just paying a little bit of attention to that detail really makes that sound a lot better. And that's mostly what programming drums is. If you want them to sound good and realistic, is just the attention to the detail, making sure that you get the velocity right on the notes, making sure that you're paying attention to what a drummer would actually be doing in those cases, just stuff like that. Just paying attention. So let's keep listening to it. So right here, let's change the beat up a little bit. I'm gonna do some like I hear like a dugga 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 double bass drum sort of thing happening. Actually, that's kind of cool. Let's change these cymbals just to break up the monotony a little bit. Okay, so that's pretty cool. And then maybe like another one of these quick little 16th note fills in here. We'll adjust those velocities. Obviously, wouldn't hit a bell there at the same time as the roll. That's what I'm talking about. Just making sure that you don't have your drummer doing some crazy three-armed man stuff. Actually, one more hit. Yeah, maybe one more. Cool. All right. Alrighty, so now... and you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and grab all of these snares here. And, whoops. And we're just going to drop all the snares down a little bit, maybe to like 100, 103. For two reasons. Number one is just because like 127, you know, it's essentially 100% velocity. 100% velocity all the time just starts sounding really robotic. And if you lower it down a little bit, it will just help make the drum sound a little bit more natural. And the other reason is because if you really want to accent something later, like maybe you want a hit to be really loud, maybe you want it to sound really powerful. Well, if all of your hits are at 127, you're not going to be able to get that powerful hit in. So it's a good idea to program a little bit lower. Now, I say that with exception to a couple things. I think the bass drum, you know, probably should be at 127 all the time, you know, for metal music anyways. Should probably be at 127 all the time. And then your cymbals, you know, you can vary a little bit, you can change it, but I think that they're a little bit safer to use a higher velocity on, because they don't seem to change as much as like the snare drum and the toms with the velocity increasing or decreasing. Okay, so after this little fill here, I want to go into a blast beat. And so I think the easiest way to do that is, rather than programming in every little hit individually, is we're just gonna program a few of them here. And then do the same thing as before, where we will copy and paste all of them in place. Let's listen to that. Cool. Okay, so the blast beat is correct, but it sounds ridiculous. And it sounds ridiculous because these are all at 127 velocity. So we're just going to select all of them. Oops, missed that one. And drop them down probably to 80s. Let's say 85. Whatever, something close. Let's see what that sounds like. Okay, getting a little bit of audio glitch there. I think it's just the way I have this recording setup going. I'm using my sound card for both recording audio and playing it back at the same time, so it's kind of weird. But anyways, so yeah, you can hear that it sounds much better once you drop the velocity down on the blast beats. Way more realistic sounding, way better. So from there, let's actually make these Chinas. And then make these ones Chinas. I just want to add in some more bells here. Do like a little quick fast bell thing. That's not a fast bell thing. What's going on here? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Okay, now this is also equally ridiculous because a drummer would never be able to hit a bell 100% that fast. So let's drop these way down. I'm actually going to change these up a little bit. Sort of like randomize them a little. They're a little quiet, so I'm just going to bring them up a little bit. Specifically this one. Make these all chinas. Throw a splash in there for good measure. Make these hi-hats. And then let's do a fill right here to transition into the next part. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete all those. And most of the time when I'm programming fills, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just going for it. And sometimes I end up with things that sound cool. And sometimes I have to sit here and work things over and over and over and over again until I get something that's actually usable. So let's see which one this is. Sounds pretty cool. Sounds a little ridiculous. So let's just go in and start adjusting some velocities. Also, the reason that I program these at 127 velocity initially and then I go and I change it is because when I program them, I just want to hear the notes cutting through to make sure the placement is correct before I actually go in and adjust the velocities. So that's the way it works for me. Hopefully that's helpful. Okay. And then we'll adjust every second hit. Drop those down a little bit. Especially these. Okay, still sounds a little crazy, but it sounds pretty cool. All right, so now this whole section is more or less done. I'm not like 100% happy with it. I probably go through and tweak a little bit, but you get the idea. And that's how I go about programming the MIDI for these songs. I just, go through and I do like a really rough version initially when I'm recording the riff, and then I just go through and fine tune it afterwards, and try to make the drums more accommodating to the guitar tracks so that everything kind of fits together better. Let's go back to this thing here. So this plugin that I was talking about earlier, this can actually help out quite a bit. What this does is this actually will change the velocity and the timing on your MIDI notes. So what you could do here is you actually have a bias timing humanization knob. Oh, excuse me. Let me start off the first one. First line is a baseline velocity. So what the baseline velocity is if it's at 0, it doesn't change anything about the note. It uses the actual velocity that you program the note at. And if you change it, it will actually change the velocity of all your notes to match this baseline velocity. So I always leave that on 0 because I go in and I edit the majority of the velocities of my notes by hand anyways. The second setting we have here is the bias timing humanization. And what that does is when it's set to 0, it will not bias the timing at all. It will just randomize it. But the further up you move it or the further down you move it, the faster, the slower the bias will be. Meaning when it randomizes the timing on the notes, if it's set to randomize faster, what it will do is it will actually more often move the notes and make them a little bit faster. And same thing for slower. Second is the timing humanization level. So that's how much you want it to change the timing. If it's set to 0, it won't change it. And then the higher you set this, the more dramatic the time shifts will be. So typically what I do here, and what I find most common is that drummers will actually rush notes. I think it's more common drummers rush than they're slower behind the note. So I just bump that up a little bit, and then this guy will be pretty liberal with it. And then, so these are the controls for the velocity, and the velocity is the same thing. If your velocity humanization level is really high, the velocity swings will be super dramatic. And if it's really low, it won't change at all. I usually set it pretty low. I usually set it right around 0.5. And the reason is because I'm adjusting most of these velocities by hand anyways. So really what I want this to do is I just want it to go through and sort of just subtly change the velocity on my notes and randomize the velocity a little bit to make it a little bit more human sounding, so that every note that I've programmed, especially like on blast beats and stuff like that, where it's the same velocity over and over and over and over and over again, it will actually go through and just adjust those velocities just a little bit to make the sounds a little bit more human. Okay, and so here's what this sounds like. These outputs, these read-only outputs, are just showing you what it's actually doing to the notes. And it's a really subtle change, but you know, it does make a difference in the mix. And you can turn this off, and here's what it sounds like without it. And on. And just to show you, you know, if you get crazy with it and just turn this stuff all the way up, what it does. I mean, you can hear the velocity on some of those notes is so low that you can't even hear them. Even with these cranked, it doesn't change the timing so far where it's off time. So you can be pretty liberal with these ones, but the velocity, I usually leave that pretty low. Maybe at like 1. 1's about the most I'll go. Okay, so yeah, that's how I program drums. Hopefully this has been informational and helpful to you. If you liked the video, please hit the like button. And if you enjoy my content, please subscribe and hit the bell. If you have any questions about this, go ahead and leave a question in the comments, or, you know, if you're feeling thoughtful, just leave a comment in the comments anyways. If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing. Thanks for watching.